at Unit 9, you will see it's only one chapter, and it's a very short chapter because it does carry or lend quite a lot from other chapters and units that we've already done, like for instance lean construction we've done already, sustainability, planning, safety we've dealt with, although this chapter that we're going to look at focuses more on this. And then we've got waste management, which we also had a look at already. So looking at Unit 9, Chapter 12, planning for safety. So it's mostly focused on this. So good health and safety practices is part of any good management, and not just only additional consideration. If you do your right or correct planning, safety can actually lead you into the right direction with regard to your project management and planning. So it does help you quite a lot, especially if you think about method statements, etc., etc. Okay, it forms an integrated part of planning and control, like I just said. And then we've got health relates to the physical and mental being of persons at work. So you need to differentiate between what health is. So it's the physical health and mental health of your workers, and then safety is concerned with the protection of workers, passers-by, or visitors to site from physical injury. This can be quite comprehensive because it deals with your neighbors, etc. Especially if you're working, for instance, on mining, or where you have a lot of dust that's produced on your site. You might have some problems with passers-by, so with the downfall of that, and asthma and health concerns with regard to that. So it's always good to think about the spin-off of the community at large. Then you've got welfare that also forms part of this, and it relates to the provision of facilities for those at work so as to maintain their health and well-being. So welfare is more to do with achieving health and safety, and welfare can it's a place to you create a place of a healthy and safe environment for your employees. Okay, and it begins with at the top of the structure, and this is I always use the analogy that if top management is concerned about health and safety, they will not just merely see it as a nuisance, and they will actually take note of any risks that is highlighted by any of their consultants or anyone concerned about that, and they will also think about proactively of the health and welfare and safety of their personnel and people working for them. Site manager is concerned usually with ensuring that compliance of the law, like for instance getting a certificate from Department of Labor before construction is done, whether health and safety file is in place, whether the safety rep has been appointed, has all the medicals been done on site, etc., etc., etc. Has everyone been cleared to actually do their work, especially if you do health and safety on mines. It can cause a lot of delays if, for instance, your workers have to go for induction training, and that might take anything to up to 2 weeks. So it's important that he's aware of all the compliances that's needed. Making sure that there is an appropriate safety management system in place for particular site in question. So this basically relates to your health and safety file, the identification of hazards that might give rise to accidents on site. This is a day-to-day function that he has. I also use the analogy that we used to have as consultants. We used to have a take 5 little booklet where we would stop and take a bit of a 5-minute just to highlight any hazards that you identified and maybe issued a contract instruction for or anything like that. So it's basically identifying any immediate hazards that should be addressed immediately. Then assessing your risk arising from hazards in question and putting in place appropriate control measures to deal with the risks. So the main thing is it doesn't just help to identify a risk, you need to mitigate that, and we'll get to that a little bit later on how to get rid of the risk or limit the risk or lower the risk or manage the risk. Devising safe systems for work, providing adequate PPE, for instance, step ladders, tools that's been serviced regularly, etc., etc. Okay, so usually health and safety looks like the following. You've got your managing director, you've got your construction director, underneath him you've got your construction managers, below them, and then you've got your site manager, and then your site foreman, and then you usually have your health and safety advisor in here, and it is usually from the top that it's managed or approved that the health and safety advisor should be appointed at appropriate place. So obviously this is specific to a project. Obviously if you've got a company, health and safety, there might be a health and safety section or department on this side that specifically looks at the welfare of the company, and usually the company has a policy in place that every 6 months or once a year all the personnel should have a safety inspection, or not inspection but a medical that's done, so that at least everything is up to date for whenever they have to go to site or in the workplaces or so. Health and safety management, the management system, the elements that's involved usually with your health and safety management. Usually there's like a policy. Policies usually applies to companies. You've got the health and safety concerned about the organization. You've got the planning for it, and then you've got the measures of performance that just measures all of these items, and you've got your audit and reviews, which plugs into the items above. So your audits and reviews is sharp point from which your performance is measured against your planning and then against your organizational policies. Then you've got safety of site operations, specific now to a site. The contractor has the following duties with regard to the personnel: safe working systems, ensuring safe means of handling, use, storage and transport of articles, provision of information, instructions, training and supervision, safe place of work, and a working environment. Okay, so this is basically just a repetition of what we've said already. Then we've got our risk assessments, and this is quite an important little form that you need to know. So a risk assessment is a very basic form of just capturing what type of risks you might have on a site. So you might have your operations, so construct sheet piling or cofferdam. So this is the item that you might list. You will see this closely relates your normal method statements. So as per the previous lectures, you can either have your method statements as one with your health and safety incorporated. I like to have them together, and then health and safety is usually at the bottom of the method statement. It's just easier whenever you're going through the method statement process to do the health and safety risk assessment and method statement for health and safety together with that. So you need to know how to develop a method statement like this. So you have your operations, and then you've got the name of it, you identify the plant that's involved in it, and you've got your work sequence involved, just jotting down how everything will work, construct hard standing for piling in a locked mouth using the imported quarry waste, for instance. So you can see this is basically your health or your normal method statement already captured in here. Supervision and monitoring, who's going to look after them. You've got your site engineer, piling foreman, etc. Then your controls, you've got your authorization personal area. Is everyone trained to do the operations on site? Is there, for instance, a check-in? Is it organization, or is it only done at certain times? Is all of the safety barriers, etc., in place? And then if something happens, what will be your mitigation? Is there a first aider there? Is there a radio? Does everyone know what the emergency numbers is, etc.? Okay, is there someone to apply first aid? Is the necessary first aid kits available, etc.? In this case, it's quite interesting. They've got a life buoy, so if anyone falls into the water or so because of this specific item, they've got a life buoy available, first aid box available, and then the specific PPE applicable to that project. So very simple, but it is quite a nice starting point whenever you have to develop a safety method statement. Okay, then your contractor's risk assessment. Okay, we're going to go through this now. You've got a risk matrix that you're going to apply. So very important is always which contract it is, the contract number, prepared by whom, on which day. This date is quite nice, and sometimes they put in a number, just a numbering system here at the top as well, so it's just easy to file and locate. Then again, you've got your operation summarized, your potential hazards identified here, and then you've got your control measures on mitigating the specific hazards that's identified. So for instance, trapping and crushing by moving plant, the risk is identified as medium, and then a warning device, banksman, to assist in addressing that. Work at heights, identified as a high risk. Guardrails along block, falling arrests, and etc. might also be put in there. So that's basically how you go through that. Then it's programmed for which date to start on the 16th of June. Training certificates, if there is any necessary. You might have your medicals that has to be in here. Has the crane operator done his necessary training, etc., etc. Then certain actions that has to be taken. Is their method statement done? Yes. Permit, for instance, if you like scaffolding, has it been signed off or so? Do you have the necessary permits to work in this area? Especially like in the red zone of the mines, you need a permit to actually work there, and there's a lot of examples of that, or possibilities of that. Okay, and then you've got specific assessments that needs to be done. This changes, and you can get a couple of standard items that you can develop within your company. Okay, and then again, what PPE is required. Then we get to our hazards and risks, identifying it. So we're moving towards our risk matrix, and I hope everyone has seen a risk matrix before. I'm just going to highlight it again. So hazards and risks. So you might identify the following: working at heights, working from a ladder, deep excavations, etc. So this is just some examples that you need to know. Okay, then identifying your hazards. You've got your generic, your definitions, your specific items. Then you've got your examples, again some nice examples. Why I wrote this as important is basically for any discussions you would want to go through this so that you have nice examples to actually discuss in your questions. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to list or draw these hazards. This is merely for examples if you need to discuss any questions that I might ask. Okay, so you can go through these. Okay, then we get to our risk evaluation, and many of you might have seen a risk matrix like this, and it's a very simple risk matrix. So firstly, we've got our quantitative risks, which you can actually measure, and then qualitative risks is those that you need to use your judgment and experience on. Okay, so for instance, looking at working at heights on a ladder, so it's quite, you first have your likelihood of something happening, and then you've got the consequences of that. So firstly, you look at your likelihood. So the likelihood that someone might fall from a ladder is quite likely, or let's it depend. It might be moderate. Between moderate and likely, you can identify it, and then you can either then looking at what the consequences of it might be. It depends on how high they might be. So there might be major implications of it. Okay, they might break an arm or so, but usually the chances of someone getting a fatal accident from working on ladders might be the chances of it might be minor. So if you identify, for instance, it as a moderate likelihood and a minor consequence, then it will be highlighted as a moderate risk. Now, working at heights on the second and third floor on scaffolding, you might have it still might be a moderate risk that you've got, but the implications thereof is, for instance, major. So then you might identify it as a extreme risk, and thus on your matrix shown in the previous slides, it will be highlighted as such. Okay, then you got your site layout planning. You guys can go through this table. It's always also a good table just to use for your discussion purposes. For our purposes, the main thing is that you need to just know the headings, and then you should be able to discuss what is dealt with underneath each of these headings. Okay, then work activities. You've got your excavations, working at heights, manual handling. So this is just your control measures and a nice items to go through so that you can discuss some of the questions that might be asked. Okay, then we get to the pressures on health and safety, and this is a very nice diagram, and always easy for, or not easy, but it's a nice question always, because it basically summarizes everything on health and safety. So you've got your external pressures on the one side, and you've got your internal pressures on the other side. So keeping within the budget, keep the profit target, keep the program. And then you've got your IT support, training, equipment, resources, and technical support that puts pressure on on your site. And then you've got your supporting organization. Is there adequate funds, for instance, to do the medicals timeously, etc. Your site management, is that in place? Is your head office supportive of the health and safety on site? Is the PPE that's issued, is it readily available, etc. Then you've got your frontline workers actually doing the work where the risk is. So you've got your internal pressures, equipping your personnel with the right PPE, for instance, risk assessments, etc. Then you've got your external pressures, which is your client satisfaction. For instance, time. Does he want to have everything in time? The quality. Does he want that little nip that was painted incorrectly on the 6th floor to be painted again? So you have to maybe think about a harness, getting a cherry picker to do that, leaving the scaffolding on, that type of thing. The specific dangers of actually working at height, for instance, or working at hazards like, for instance, dust, environments, dangerous chemicals, etc. Then you've got the law, applying to the law. Is everything in place? Has all the necessary inspections been done, etc. Then you've got the environment. Where are you working? Are you working in a busy mining area where trucks are driving around? Are you working in places where blasting might be taking place? Is a place where community riots are rife? Is there, for instance, pirates that you might have on your site that demand a certain portion be paid to them? So that's the type of environments that we're looking at. Whether working at in windy areas, can you work at height all of the time? The amount of rain per year also might also have an influence on maybe collapse of trenches, etc. So these are all of the pressures that's put on health and safety. Okay, so a very important diagram to know. Okay, and then you've got your conclusions. The deeper causes of accidents are, in contrast to individual causing accidents. Usually it was found in the book that poor work planning usually contributes to an unsafe working area, lack of safety systems, and poor communication and poor health and safety culture. If you think about it, if you have a good health and safety culture, all of these items will usually be addressed. If your managing director is very health and safety inclined, you would implement more health and safety measures or audits more regularly also. Okay, so this is just a conclusion, and I think yes, that is the last slide. So yes, please go through the work. Please read the slides in conjunction with your prescribed book. So thank you everyone. Keep well.